Welcome to Beyond Words Library. You're exhausted, tired of trying, desperate because what we're taught, that more effort yields better results, seems like a lie. You're not doing it wrong. The system is wrong. There's a secret truly successful people know. Sometimes, the path to success is completely counterintuitive to your instincts. The Backwards Law. Introduction. The paradox that changes everything. Have you ever noticed that the harder you try to be happy, the more miserable you become? Or that the more desperately you seek love, the more it seems to elude you? Perhaps you've observed how those most obsessed with accumulating wealth often feel the poorest inside, while those fixated on appearing confident often reveal their deepest insecurities. You are not alone in these observations. You've stumbled upon one of the most profound paradoxes of human existence, what philosophers call the backwards law. This ancient wisdom has been whispered through the corridors of time by sages, mystics, and teachers across cultures. The Tao Te Ching expressed it as wu-wei, effortless action. Buddhism teaches that desire creates suffering. The Stoics understood that pursuing pleasure directly often leads to pain. Even Jesus spoke of how those who cling to life will lose it, while those who surrender will find it. Now, modern science, from quantum physics to neuroscience, is validating what the ancients always knew. Many of life's most precious experiences cannot be obtained through direct pursuit. They arrive only when we stop chasing them. The backwards law reveals that the conscious mind, with all its striving and controlling, often creates the very opposite of what it seeks. Like a Chinese finger trap, the harder you pull, the more stuck you become. The moment you relax and move in the opposite direction, the backwards direction, freedom comes effortlessly. In your hands is not just another self-help book. It is an invitation to a radical shift in consciousness. These pages contain a way of being that has transformed millions of lives throughout history, from ancient contemplatives to modern seekers just like you. As you journey through these chapters, you'll discover why direct pursuit of happiness leads to misery, while acceptance of sadness leads to joy. You'll learn why controlling emotions intensifies them, while allowing them dissolves their power. You'll understand why seeking validation creates insecurity, while self-acceptance generates authentic confidence. The paradoxical truth awaits. Sometimes the path forward requires moving backward. Sometimes surrender is the ultimate power. Sometimes letting go is the surest way to have it all. This wisdom cannot be intellectually understood alone. It must be lived, experienced, and embodied. Each chapter will guide you not just in comprehension, but in application. Through contemplative exercises, scientific insights, and transformative practices, you'll learn to dance with paradox rather than struggle against it. Are you ready to reverse the flow of your habitual patterns? To discover effortless achievement, peaceful productivity, and joyful presence? To find what you've been seeking by finally stopping the search? Take a deep breath. Feel the weight of all your striving, and prepare to put it down. The backwards journey begins now. Chapter 1. The Pursuit Paradox. Imagine for a moment that you're thirsty, desperately thirsty, and someone hands you a glass of water. What happens? You drink it instinctively, effortlessly, naturally. Your body knows exactly what to do. There's no how to drink water manual needed. The very presence of thirst and water together creates the perfect response. Now imagine something different. You're at a party, feeling awkward, and someone tells you, just relax and be yourself. What happens? The very attempt to relax creates more tension. The effort to be yourself makes you more self-conscious. The direct pursuit creates the opposite of the desired state. This is the essence of the backwards law. Certain states of being cannot be achieved through direct pursuit. They arise naturally only when we stop trying to force them. The ancient Taoist philosopher Lao Tzu understood this paradox perfectly when he wrote, "When I let go of what I am, I become what I might be." 2,000 years later, psychologist Carl Jung echoed this wisdom. What you resist persists. What you accept transforms. Consider David, a successful CEO with all the outward markers of happiness. Despite his thriving career and picture-perfect family, an inexplicable emptiness haunted him. Each achievement brought only fleeting satisfaction before hunger for the next goal emerged. During a forced sabbatical following exhaustion, he reluctantly joined a community garden. There, without pressure to achieve anything, he found a deep joy in simple cultivation that all his professional accomplishments never delivered. Most surprising to David, contentment arrived when he stopped chasing it. David's experience reflects what researchers at Harvard University have discovered. People who directly strive for happiness actually become less happy over time. The very act of measuring your emotional state, "Am I happy yet?" creates a gap between expectation and reality. The more desperately you seek joy, the more it seems to recede from your grasp. By contrast, those who focus on meaning, purpose, and contribution, who accept the full spectrum of emotions as natural, paradoxically experience greater fulfillment as a byproduct. Joy arrives not from pursuing it directly, but from letting it find you while you're engaged in something meaningful. This pattern manifests repeatedly in life. People obsessed with appearing confident often come across as insecure, while those comfortable with vulnerability radiate genuine confidence. Individuals desperately searching for love frequently repel it, while those cultivating self-acceptance naturally attract healthy relationships. Similarly, those fixated on accumulating wealth often feel perpetually impoverished, while those practicing gratitude experience abundance regardless of their financial status. Take Sarah, a marketing director who meticulously crafted a life checklist: promotion, relationship, home ownership, 30 countries before 35. Despite checking most boxes, chronic dissatisfaction followed her until her mother's cancer diagnosis forced her to pause her ambitions. While caring for her mother, something unexpected emerged. In those difficult months, with her attention completely shifted away from her own happiness, Sarah experienced profound moments of connection and even peace amidst the pain. The contentment that had eluded her deliberate quest arrived when she forgot to chase it. Modern neuroscience illuminates why the backwards law operates. When you fixate on a desired state, you activate the brain's monitoring system, the default mode network, which constantly checks whether you've reached your goal. This creates a self-consciousness that prevents the very condition you're trying to achieve. Additionally, psychologists describe the ironic process theory. When you try not to think about something, like a white bear, your mind becomes more fixated on it. The very attempt to control your internal experience often amplifies what you're trying to avoid. Consider two people trying to fall asleep. One lies awake thinking, "I must sleep now. Why can't I sleep? I need to try harder to sleep." The other accepts, "I'm awake right now, and that's okay. Sleep will come when it comes." Which one do you think will fall asleep faster? Liu, a 65-year-old with chronic insomnia, tried every sleep aid and technique available, becoming increasingly anxious about sleep quality. His doctor suggested paradoxical intention therapy, intentionally trying to stay awake rather than fall asleep. When Liu stopped forcing sleep and instead embraced wakefulness, his sleep anxiety diminished, and natural sleep patterns gradually returned. These insights extend beyond theoretical understanding. The implications transform how we approach daily life. Instead of chasing happiness directly, immerse yourself in purposeful activities and present-moment awareness. Rather than fighting against anxiety, allow it to flow through you without resistance. Embrace your authentic vulnerability instead of forcing an appearance of confidence. Observe your thoughts with friendly curiosity instead of attempting to control them. Marcus, a concert pianist, battled debilitating performance anxiety for years. Before important concerts, his attempts to suppress nervousness only intensified his symptoms: racing heart, shaking hands, catastrophic thoughts. Everything shifted when a performance coach suggested he welcome his anxiety rather than fight it. Before his next recital, Instead of resisting his racing heart, Marcus thought, "Hello, nervousness, I see you're here again." This simple acknowledgement transformed his relationship with anxiety. The symptoms didn't disappear, but they no longer controlled him. By accepting rather than resisting his emotional state, Marcus gave one of his most compelling performances. The spiritual teacher Krishnamurti put it simply, "I don't mind what happens." This isn't passive resignation, but radical acceptance, the understanding that your resistance to what is creates more suffering than the actual circumstances. Alan Watts, the philosopher who brought Eastern wisdom to Western audiences, explained, "When you try to stay on the surface of the water, you sink, but when you try to sink, you float." The backwards law reveals that many of our most natural states, contentment, sleep, flow, confidence, emerge not through mastery and control, but through surrender and trust. This doesn't suggest we should never apply effort or establish goals. Rather, it points to a fundamental shift in how we approach life's most essential experiences. Some things can be pursued directly, like building a house or learning a language. Others manifest only through indirect approaches, like happiness, love, and inner peace. The wisdom lies in recognizing the difference. Practice. The backwards experiment. For the next week, identify one area where your direct pursuit may be creating the opposite effect. Perhaps if you're struggling with insomnia, try staying awake instead of forcing sleep. If you're feeling anxious, allow yourself to feel fully anxious without resistance. When seeking happiness, redirect your attention to contributing to others' well-being. And if you're trying to impress others, practice revealing your authentic self instead. Notice what unfolds when you reverse the flow of your habitual patterns. The backwards law isn't just an interesting concept. It's a lived reality that reveals itself when you have the courage to try the opposite of what your controlling mind suggests. Emma tried this experiment with her chronic social anxiety. Instead of trying to appear calm at a networking event, she allowed herself to be openly nervous and even mentioned her discomfort to those she met. To her amazement, people responded with warmth and shared their own insecurities. By ceasing her effort to appear unafraid, her actual anxiety naturally diminished, and she made genuine connections that had eluded her previous confident performances. The paradox awaits your discovery. What if the very thing you've been seeking has been waiting for you to stop seeking it? Chapter 2. The Effortless Nature of Being. There's a beautiful tree outside your window right now. Take a moment to imagine it. Notice how it grows, not through effort, striving, or self-improvement seminars. It grows naturally, responding to sunlight, water, and soil. The tree doesn't try to be a better tree. It simply expresses its innate nature. What if your essential being operates the same way? Beneath your thinking mind, with all its planning, worrying, and controlling, lies an effortless intelligence that knows exactly how to live. Just as your heart beats, your lungs breathe, and your wounds heal without your conscious direction, this deeper intelligence navigates life when you get out of its way. The great Zen master Shunryu Suzuki called this beginner's mind, the natural state before our thinking clutters the simplicity of being. He taught, "In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few." When we return to our essential nature, we discover an effortless flow that the struggling mind cannot access. This isn't merely poetic language. The neuroscience of flow states, those moments when you're so absorbed in an activity that time seems to disappear, reveals that the brain's self-monitoring centers actually deactivate. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for self-critical thinking, becomes less active. Your normal sense of separation dissolves, and you enter a state of effortless performance. Athletes call it being in the zone. Musicians experience it when they become one with their instruments. Artists know it when the painting seems to create itself. These aren't superhuman achievements, but glimpses of our natural state when the controlling mind steps aside. The backwards law operates here with stunning clarity. The harder you try to enter flow, the more elusive it becomes. Flow arrives not through effort, but through surrender to the activity itself. Consider a child learning to ride a bicycle. At first, they focus intensely on every movement, gripping the handlebars with white knuckles. But mastery comes when they stop thinking about the process, when riding becomes effortless, intuitive, natural. The same principle applies to public speaking, athletic performance, creative expression, and even spiritual awakening. The ancient Taoist concept of wu-wei, effortless action, describes this perfectly. It's not about doing nothing. It's about allowing action to arise from your deepest nature rather than from forced effort. Like water flowing downhill, wu-wei follows the path of least resistance while accomplishing everything necessary. Modern productivity research confirms this counterintuitive truth. Studies show that forcing longer hours often reduces overall output, while strategic rest enhances creativity and efficiency. The most productive people often work in focused bursts, followed by complete disengagement, a rhythm that honors our natural cycles rather than forcing constant output. Even in healing, the backwards law reveals its wisdom. Psychologists have documented how desperate attempts to fix ourselves often reinforce the very patterns we're trying to change. By contrast, approaches like acceptance and commitment therapy show that accepting our thoughts and feelings, rather than struggling against them, creates space for natural transformation. Think about a time when you were trying to remember someone's name. The harder you tried, the more it eluded you. Then later, when you stopped trying, the name effortlessly appeared in your consciousness. Your mind knew the answer all along. Your effort was actually blocking its natural function. This doesn't mean abandoning all discipline or structure. Rather, it suggests a different relationship with effort, one that works with your natural rhythms instead of against them. The backwards law invites us to distinguish between productive effort and counterproductive striving. The 13th century Persian poet Rumi captured this perfectly. Your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. What if this applies not just to love, but to peace, creativity, wisdom, and authentic power? The paradox transforms how we approach personal growth. Instead of adding more techniques, strategies, and knowledge, what if the path forward involves removing the obstacles to what's already there? What if your essence, like the tree outside your window, already knows exactly how to flourish? Practice. Effortless presence. Find a comfortable position and close your eyes. For the next few minutes, practice non-doing. Don't try to meditate, quiet your mind, or achieve any particular state. Simply be aware of what's already happening. First, notice your breath without controlling it. Then feel sensations in your body without changing them. Next, observe thoughts passing without engaging them. Finally, let sounds come and go without labeling them. When you notice yourself trying or controlling, gently recognize this and return to simple awareness. This isn't about achieving a peaceful state. It's about discovering the peace that exists when you stop trying to manufacture it. After several minutes, ask yourself, what remains when I stop trying to be anything other than what I am in this moment? The effortless nature of being isn't something you create. It's what you are when the struggle subsides. Chapter 3. The Mirror of Inner State. What if reality itself follows the backwards law? What if the universe responds not to our conscious demands, but to the deeper currents of our inner state? Modern science has unveiled a universe far stranger than our everyday experience suggests. At the smallest scales, particles don't exist in fixed states, but as possibilities, shifting only when observed. This active observation seems to influence what reality becomes. Even more intriguing, particles can stay connected across vast distances, acting as if no separation exists between them. These discoveries challenge our usual ideas about how the world works and hint at a deeper connection between our minds and reality. These findings resonate with what ancient wisdom has long taught. Our inner world shapes our outer experience. The person observing and the world observed are not entirely separate, but part of a larger whole. As physicist Max Planck once said, I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as derivative from consciousness. This perspective reshapes how we think about achieving our goals and desires. Many popular methods suggest that if you focus hard enough on what you want, reality will bend to your will. But the backwards law offers a subtler truth. The universe responds not to what you demand, but to the way you feel and think deep down. Consider Sophia, a student struggling to make ends meet while pursuing her degree. Working multiple jobs, she'd lied awake counting her dwindling funds, consumed by thoughts like, I'll never have enough. Despite her relentless effort, her financial situation stayed precarious. During a volunteer program, she met an older woman who saw her exhaustion. You're always chasing, the woman said, but never open to receiving. She taught Sophia to pause each day and appreciate what she already had, her health, her education, even small things like a warm meal. At first, Sophia thought this was pointless. How could gratitude pay her bills? But she tried it. Within weeks, she felt calmer. Her bosses noticed her improved focus and offered better hours. A kind stranger she helped connected her to a scholarship she hadn't known about. The strangest part, Sophia later said, wasn't just that things got better. It was that I felt rich inside even before they did. When you fixate on what's missing, money, love, or success, you reinforce a sense of lack. Your mind zeroes in on what's absent, blinding you to possibilities that don't fit your expectations. This creates a cycle. Worrying about what you don't have narrows your focus, shapes your choices, and changes how you interact with others, ultimately molding your reality. In contrast, fostering a sense of enough, valuing what's already yours while pursuing goals, opens your mind to new opportunities and solutions. Science backs this up. Studies in psychology show that our emotions and beliefs affect our bodies in measurable ways, from heart rate to stress levels. For example, research from the HeartMath Institute shows that feelings like gratitude can improve heart rhythm and reduce stress hormones, while anxiety does the opposite. Other studies, like those by Harvard's Ellen Langer, reveal that a positive mindset can influence physical health, much like the placebo effect shows belief can drive real changes in the body. The connection between mind and reality is still debated. Some scientists, like Roger Penrose, suggest our brains might tap into deeper patterns of the universe, but others argue these effects are purely psychological, not cosmic. The backwards law invites us to see this not as a definitive answer, but as a way to rethink how we approach our desires. The value lies in exploring how our inner state shapes our experience, whether through science or metaphor. An ancient teaching puts it simply, as within, so without. Your outer world mirrors your inner one, not because the universe is judging you, but because your thoughts and feelings shape how you see and act in the world. This shifts the idea of manifestation from forcing outcomes to aligning with a sense of fullness. Instead of obsessing over what you lack, you nurture the feeling of already having enough. Instead of dwelling on problems, you focus on what's possible. Can you sense the difference this makes? Pause and notice how your body feels when you move from wanting to appreciating. Imagine two people with the same goal. One thinks, I'm broke, I need money, I have to get more. The other feels, I have what I need, opportunities come easily, I'm grateful. Which mindset do you think opens more doors? This isn't about pretending or ignoring reality. It's about recognizing that how you feel inside influences the opportunities you noticed and the choices you make. The backwards law shows that achieving your desires often comes not from chasing harder, but from embracing a sense of completeness. Research in epigenetics adds another layer. Your thoughts and emotions can influence how your genes work, changing how your body responds to the world. Your mind doesn't just react to reality, it helps shape it. As mystic Neville Goddard said, you don't attract what you want, you attract what you are. The Buddha taught that craving leads to suffering because it locked you into lack. Jesus urged praying as if your wish was already granted. The backwards law of manifestation boils down to this: you don't get what you chase, you get what you embody. And you embody who you are, not who you think you should be. This doesn't mean giving up on goals. Instead, it suggests a new way to pursue them. Practice gratitude for what's here, focus on possibilities, shift how you relate to reality, and be fully present where you are. Think for a moment. How might your life change if you moved from always wanting more to deeply valuing what you have? What could open up if you stopped fighting reality and started working with it? Practice. Embracing a state of enough. Pick something you've been trying to achieve or attract. Start by noticing how you feel about this desire. Without judging, sense if there's tension, worry, or a feeling of not having enough. Where do you feel this in your body? Now, try shifting your focus. Instead of thinking about what's missing, imagine what it would feel like to have the essence of what you seek. What would it bring you? Peace, connection, freedom. Focus on those qualities, not just the thing itself. Rather than picturing the goal, embody the feeling of already having those qualities. Notice how your body changes, your breath, your posture, your face, as you move from lack to fullness. Practice this shift every day for 2 weeks. Pay attention to how it affects your stress, your ability to spot opportunities, your interactions with others, and your creativity in solving problems. This isn't about magic or wishful thinking. It's about discovering how your inner state shapes what you see, how you act, and what you experience. The backwards law suggests the shortest path to what you want often lies in changing how you relate to wanting. This idea ties to the broader wisdom of this book, from the paradox of pursuit in Chapter 1 to the surrender we'll explore next. True power often comes when we stop forcing outcomes and align with life's deeper flow. The mirror of your inner state reflects not what you demand, but who you are. In the interplay of mind and world, who's leading? The backwards law suggests reality doesn't follow your orders. It echoes your essence. Chapter 4. The Wisdom of Surrender. In a world that worships control, surrender might seem like weakness. Our culture celebrates those who force outcomes, overcome obstacles, and master their destiny through sheer willpower. Yet the backwards law reveals a counterintuitive truth. Sometimes the greatest power comes through letting go. The concept of surrender appears across spiritual traditions with remarkable consistency. In Christianity, Jesus teaches, "Whoever tries to keep their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life will preserve it." In Islam, the very word Islam means submission to divine will. Buddhism emphasizes non-attachment as the path to liberation. The Hindu Bhagavad Gita counsels action without attachment to results. Why does surrender occupy such a central place in wisdom traditions? Because the human tendency to control, to force life into our preferred shape, often creates the very suffering we're trying to avoid. Consider the paradox of anxiety. The more desperately you try to stop feeling anxious, the more intense your anxiety becomes. Resistance creates persistence. By contrast, when you surrender to the feeling, when you allow anxiety to be present without fighting it, something remarkable happens. The feeling moves through you rather than becoming stuck. Surrender doesn't intensify the emotion. It creates space for its natural resolution. This pattern appears throughout human experience. The insomniac who surrenders to wakefulness falls asleep. The grief-stricken person who allows their sorrow finds healing. The addict who acknowledges their powerlessness begins recovery. In each case, surrender isn't passive resignation but active acceptance that creates the conditions for transformation. Modern psychology confirms what the mystics have always known. Acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, demonstrates that psychological flexibility, the ability to be present with difficult experiences without resistance, correlates strongly with mental health. Similarly, studies on resilience show that people who accept challenging circumstances while taking appropriate action fare better than those who either resort to denial or become overwhelmed. The backwards law operates here with beautiful precision. Control creates tension, while surrender creates flow. Consider the metaphor of swimming. When someone begins to drown, their instinctive response is to fight the water, to struggle against it. Yet experienced swimmers know that floating, surrendering to the water's support, is what actually saves lives. The very element that threatens to destroy you will support you when you stop fighting it. This wisdom applies to life's currents. The circumstances you resist most strongly are often the very experiences calling you to grow. The emotions you fight most desperately are precisely the feelings that need your acceptance. The uncertainties that terrify you might be doorways to deeper trust. Neurologically, surrender shifts activity from the sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight, to the parasympathetic nervous system, rest and digest. This physiological shift allows the body's natural healing mechanisms to activate. Your system literally cannot rest, digest, heal, or restore itself while in a state of resistance. Surrender isn't spiritual bypassing, it's biological wisdom. But what exactly are we surrendering to? Not to external authority, passive resignation, or acceptance of injustice. Rather, we surrender to what Eckhart Tolle calls the power of now, the reality of this moment exactly as it is. We surrender our resistance to life's flow, our insistence that things be different, our attachment to how we think things should be. The 12-step recovery movement expresses this through the Serenity Prayer. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. This discernment, knowing when to act and when to accept, is the heart of practical wisdom. Michael Singer, author of The Surrender Experiment, discovered that when he surrendered his personal preferences to life's flow, he was guided to unexpected opportunities that far exceeded his limited imagination. His tech company became worth billions not because he forced this outcome, but because he remained open to possibilities beyond his planning mind. This doesn't mean abandoning responsibility or action. Rather, it suggests a different relationship with action, one that arises from acceptance rather than resistance. When you fully accept what is, your response comes from clarity rather than reactivity. Your action emerges from wisdom rather than fear. In relationships, the backwards law of surrender works with striking precision. The more desperately you try to control your partner, the more distance you create. The more you surrender to what the relationship actually is, rather than what you think it should be, the more space you create for authentic connection. Even in the face of life's greatest challenges, illness, loss, death, surrender offers a pathway not to defeat, but to dignity. Those who fight reality's fundamental nature suffer twice, once from the circumstance itself, and again from their resistance to it. Those who surrender, who say yes to life even in its most difficult expressions, discover a profound peace amidst the storm. The psychiatrist Viktor Frankl, who survived Nazi concentration camps, observed that the prisoners who fared best weren't the physically strongest, but those who maintained the last of human freedoms, the ability to choose their attitude in any circumstance. This inner surrender, accepting what cannot be changed while choosing one's response, became the foundation of his logotherapy. The backwards law reveals that surrender isn't weakness but wisdom. It's not about giving up, but about giving way, allowing life's intelligence to move through you rather than blockading it with resistance. In surrender, you don't diminish, you expand beyond the limited perspective of the controlling self. Practice. The Surrender Experiment. For 1 week, practice conscious surrender with everyday annoyances. When you encounter traffic, long lines, difficult people, or minor inconveniences, experiment with completely accepting the situation rather than resisting it. Notice the difference between saying, "This shouldn't be happening," and "This is happening." Feel a shift in your body as you release resistance. Observe how your response changes when you surrender to what is. For bigger challenges, try asking, what would this situation look like if I completely accepted it while taking appropriate action? What becomes possible when I stop fighting reality? Stop reading for a moment and think of something you've been resisting lately. How does your body feel when you think about this situation with resistance? Now imagine fully accepting it exactly as it is. Does your breathing change? Do your shoulders relax? This subtle body response offers valuable feedback about the power of surrender. Remember, surrender isn't passive resignation, but active alignment with life's flow. It's not about doing nothing. It's about allowing action to arise from acceptance rather than resistance. The wisdom of surrender invites a profound question. What if the control you've been seeking is actually available only when you stop trying to control? Chapter 5. The Illusion of Separation. Take a moment to consider a simple question. Where do you end? Most people instinctively point to their skin, this apparent boundary between self and not self. But is this boundary as solid as it seems? With every breath, air from outside becomes your body, while air from inside returns to the atmosphere. Every meal transforms plants and animals into your cells. Every thought contains concepts, language, and images absorbed from your culture. Every emotion flows through biological pathways evolved over millions of years. The backwards law reveals a stunning paradox. The more you cling to a separate self, the more alienated you feel. The more you recognize your fundamental interconnection, the more fully you experience your unique individuality. Ancient wisdom traditions have always recognized this truth. Buddhism teaches anatta, no self, revealing that the fixed, separate self is an illusion. Indigenous cultures worldwide emphasize kinship with all beings. The Upanishads declare Tat Tam Asi, you are that, pointing to the unity between individual consciousness and cosmic awareness. Jesus prayed that his followers would be one as we are one. Now, modern science is catching up to these ancient insights. Systems theory demonstrates that no entity exists in isolation. Everything is part of larger wholes and composed of smaller parts, all in constant relationship. Ecology reveals that organisms don't exist separately from their environments, but as integral components of complex webs. Quantum physics shows that at the subatomic level, seemingly separate particles remain instantaneously connected across vast distances. Even neuroscience, once the bastion of brain-based identity, now recognizes that our neural networks extend beyond our skulls. The concept of the extended mind shows how our cognition includes our environment, tools, and relationships. Your mind isn't just in your brain, it's distributed throughout your body and beyond. The separate self, it turns out, is a useful fiction, a conceptual tool that helps navigate daily life but ultimately misrepresents the nature of reality. Like the horizon, it appears real but dissolves upon approach. The self is not a thing, but a process, not an isolated entity, but a dynamic pattern of relationships. This recognition transforms your experience in profound ways. The boundaries between self and other, subject and object, perceiver and perceived become more transparent. Your joys and sorrows are recognized not as entirely personal possessions, but as waves in a larger ocean of consciousness. Your actions are understood not as isolated events, but as movements within a vast interdependent web. Consider how the backwards law operates here. The more firmly you identify with a separate self, the more alienated you feel from life. The more you recognize your interconnection, the more authentically you experience your unique expression. This isn't abstract philosophy. It's practical wisdom with immediate implications. Environmental challenges appear not as external problems, but as symptoms of our collective body in distress. Social conflicts are recognized not as battles between separate selves, but as tensions within a shared field. Personal suffering is understood not as isolated misfortune, but as a call for the whole system to heal. Death transforms from absolute termination to transition within a continuous process. In relationships, the illusion of separation creates endless suffering. When you perceive yourself as fundamentally separate, every interaction becomes a negotiation between competing interests. But when you recognize your interconnection, relationships become expressions of the same life flowing through different forms. Compassion arises not as virtue, but as natural recognition of shared being. Studies on altruism show that those who help others experience greater well-being than those focused solely on personal gain. The backwards law at work. Prioritizing separation creates suffering, while recognizing connection creates flourishing. This understanding doesn't negate your uniqueness. Just as each wave expresses the ocean uniquely while remaining inseparable from it, your individuality becomes more authentic, not less, when recognized as an expression of the whole. True uniqueness emerges not from separation, but from relationship. The mystic Thomas Merton described a revelation on a busy street corner. I was suddenly overwhelmed with the realization that I loved all these people, that they were mine and I theirs, that we could not be alien to one another, even though we were total strangers. This recognition wasn't emotional sentimentality, but clear perception of an always present truth. The illusion of separation maintains itself through constant mental activity, comparing, judging, defending imaginary boundaries. When this activity quiets, even temporarily, the natural sense of connection reasserts itself. This is why experiences in nature, deep meditation, or psychedelic exploration often dissolve the sense of separation and reveal underlying unity. Modern psychology offers further validation through studies on flow states and peak experiences. In these heightened moments, the sense of a separate self temporarily dissolves, replaced by expanded awareness and connection. Athletes describe becoming one with the mountain while skiing. Musicians report the music playing through them rather than by them. These aren't metaphors, but accurate descriptions of consciousness beyond the illusion of separation. Even physics suggests that separation may be the illusion, not connection. The emerging theory of non-duality in quantum mechanics proposes that the appearance of separate objects emerges from an underlying unified field. In the words of physicist David Bohm, the universe is an undivided wholeness in flowing movement. The practical application of this understanding isn't to abandon individual responsibility, but to recognize that your actions affect the whole, because you are the whole expressing itself uniquely. Your choices ripple through the web of relationships that constitute reality. This isn't a burden, but a recognition of your true significance. Practice. Dissolving boundaries. Find a quiet place where you won't be disturbed. Close your eyes and focus your attention on your breath. Notice how the air moves in and out, blurring the boundary between inner and outer. Expand your awareness to include the sensations in your body. Feel the points where your body contacts the chair or floor. Is there a clear line where you end and the chair begins, or is there just sensation? Now listen to the sounds around you. Instead of labeling them as outside sounds, simply experience them as sensations arising in awareness. Are the sounds really separate from the hearing of them? Finally, notice thoughts as they arise. Instead of identifying them as your thoughts, observe them as mental events appearing in consciousness. Where do thoughts come from? Where do they go? Are they really yours? Rest in this expansive awareness for several minutes. What happens to the sense of a separate self when observed closely? The illusion of separation creates the very loneliness it seeks to protect. The backwards law reveals that true security, connection, and meaning arise not from fortifying boundaries, but from recognizing the interdependent web of which you are an integral part. Chapter 6. The Alchemy of Emotions. Emotions are energy in motion, the dynamic expression of life force moving through your human form. Yet most of us have been taught to control, manage, or suppress our emotions, especially the difficult ones. We try to banish sadness, anger, fear, and grief while clinging to happiness, peace, and love. The backwards law reveals a profound paradox. The emotions you resist persist and intensify, while the emotions you fully allow transform naturally. Ancient wisdom traditions have long recognized this truth. Buddhist mindfulness practices teach turning toward difficult emotions rather than avoiding them. The Sufis speak of becoming a clear glass through which all emotions can pass without obstruction. Indigenous healing rituals create sacred space for emotional expression rather than suppression. Have you ever noticed how differently an emotion feels when you allow it versus when you fight against it? Consider Carlos, who spent his 20s desperately seeking love while changing himself to match whatever he thought potential partners wanted. When dating someone intellectual, he hid his passion for action movies. With artistic types, he concealed his practical nature. Each relationship inevitably collapsed when maintaining these facades became exhausting. After a particularly painful breakup at 29, Carlos made a radical decision. He would spend a year without pursuing relationships, instead exploring who he actually was. He began journaling, reconnected with childhood interests, and allowed himself to experience the full spectrum of emotions, including the loneliness and insecurity he'd been running from. During a ceramics class he joined purely for personal enjoyment, Carlos met Elena. When she asked about his favorite films, he answered honestly. Fast and Furious, but also foreign documentaries. To his surprise, she appreciated his authenticity rather than judging his contradictions. 2 years later, they married. The relationship Carlos found through self-acceptance had a depth and ease that none of his carefully crafted personas had ever achieved. Now, modern psychological research confirms that emotional avoidance creates suffering while emotional acceptance leads to resilience. Studies show that people who attempt to suppress negative emotions actually experience them more intensely and for longer durations. By contrast, those who mindfully accept their emotional experiences show greater psychological flexibility and well-being over time. This understanding revolutionizes our relationship with emotions. Instead of treating difficult feelings as problems to solve, we can approach them as messengers carrying important information. Instead of creating inner conflict through resistance, we can practice compassionate presence with whatever arises. Consider grief, that profound heartache that accompanies loss. When you resist grief, trying to stay positive, or move on prematurely, the emotion doesn't disappear. It goes underground, expressing itself through depression, anxiety, or physical symptoms. But when you fully allow grief, giving it time, space, and expression, it gradually transforms into something unexpected. Deeper compassion, appreciation for life, and capacity for joy. The psychiatrist Elizabeth Kubler-Ross observed how those who fully process grief often experience profound spiritual awakening. Not because they controlled their emotions, but because they surrendered to them. The backwards law in action. Resisting grief creates suffering, while accepting grief creates healing. This pattern appears across the emotional spectrum. Suppressed anger becomes chronic resentment. Expressed anger provides clarity and boundary-setting energy. Avoided fear becomes anxiety. Accepted fear becomes alertness and intuition. Denied sadness becomes depression. Allowed sadness becomes compassion and death. Repressed joy becomes addiction. Expressed joy becomes natural gratitude. The neuroscience of emotions offers fascinating insights into this process. When you resist an emotion, you activate both the emotional circuits and the resistance circuits in your brain, creating an internal conflict that consumes massive energy. When you allow an emotion, only the emotional circuits activate, and they naturally complete their cycle. Think of emotions as waves. When you fight a wave, you exhaust yourself and might even drown. When you ride a wave, it naturally carries you to shore. Emotions have natural lifespans if allowed to complete their cycles without resistance. This understanding doesn't mean becoming a passive victim of emotional storms. Rather, it suggests a middle path between suppression and indulgence. What psychologists call emotional regulation through acceptance. You neither repress emotions nor let them control your actions. Instead, you create space for emotions to move through you while maintaining awareness. The Taoist concept of yin and yang illuminates this emotional alchemy. Every emotion contains its opposite as potential. Fully experienced sadness creates capacity for deeper joy. Acknowledged fear develops into courage. Accepted anger transforms into passion and purpose. The full spectrum of emotions, when allowed to flow, creates inner harmony rather than conflict. Even the pursuit of happiness falls under the backwards law's jurisdiction. Research at Berkeley shows that people who accept negative emotions actually experience greater psychological well-being than those who judge themselves for not being happy. The very pressure to feel good creates emotional suffering, while acceptance of the full emotional spectrum paradoxically leads to greater peace. There's an ancient Chinese story about a farmer whose horse ran away. When neighbors expressed sympathy for this misfortune, he merely replied, "Who knows if it's good or bad?" The next day, the horse returned with several wild horses. The neighbors congratulated him on his good fortune, but again he said, "Who knows if it's good or bad?" Then his son broke his leg trying to tame one of the wild horses. Everyone commiserated, but the farmer maintained his perspective. Who knows if it's good or bad? Soon after, army officials came to conscript young men for war, but his son was spared due to his broken leg. In this tale, the farmer isn't passive, but profoundly wise. Recognizing that each emotion is just one note in life's longer melody. By not attaching to any emotional state as final or defining, he maintains equanimity through life's inevitable fluctuations. This understanding transforms how we approach emotional intelligence. Instead of manipulating our emotional states to match some ideal, we develop the capacity to be present with whatever arises. Instead of asking, "How can I feel better?" we'd ask, "What is this emotion trying to tell me? What does it need?" The practice becomes simple, but profound. Meet each emotion with conscious awareness rather than automatic reactivity. Create space for emotional energy to move through your system without identifying with it as self or rejecting it as other. Recognize emotions as temporary weather patterns in your consciousness, not permanent conditions or defining characteristics. The physician Gabor Mata observes that most physical illness involves some form of emotional repression. The body expresses what the conscious mind refuses to acknowledge. The backwards law suggests that healing comes not from controlling emotions more effectively, but from releasing the control that created the imbalance. Practice. Emotional alchemy. Choose an emotion you typically resist or judge, perhaps anxiety, anger, or sadness. The next time this emotion arises, experiment with a different approach. Begin by noticing the emotion arising. Name it without judgment. Anxiety is present. Then locate the emotion in your body. Where do you feel it? What sensations accompany it? Next, breathe into that area, creating space around the sensations. Gently ask the emotion, "What message do you have for me? What do you need?" Allow the emotional energy to move through you without acting on it or suppressing it. Finally, notice how the emotion naturally transforms when given space and awareness. Take a moment to sense into your body right now. Can you feel how different it is to welcome an emotion rather than fight against it? This simple shift from resistance to acceptance can transform your entire emotional landscape. Record your experiences with this practice. Notice any patterns in how emotions flow when allowed versus when resisted. The alchemy of emotions doesn't require years of therapy or spiritual mastery. It begins with a simple willingness to feel what is present. The backwards law reveals that freedom comes not from controlling your emotional weather, but from learning to dance in the rain. Chapter 7. The Power of Embracing Death. Few things trigger our control mechanisms more powerfully than the reality of death. We build elaborate systems, from religious promises of afterlife to technological dreams of immortality, to shield ourselves from mortality's raw truth. Yet the backwards law reveals a profound paradox. The more you avoid contemplating death, the more you fear it. The more you embrace your mortality, the more vibrantly you live. Ancient wisdom traditions understood that death awareness is essential for a fully lived life. The Tibetan Buddhists practice Maranasati, death meditation, to awaken appreciation for each moment. The Stoics use memento mori, remember you will die, as a daily contemplation. Indigenous cultures worldwide maintain conscious relationship with ancestors, recognizing death as a transition rather than an ending. Modern psychology confirms the transformative power of death awareness. Research on mortality salience shows that healthy contemplation of death increases generosity, decreases materialism, and enhances appreciation for life's simple pleasures. Studies on near-death experiences reveal that those who face death often return with diminished fear, increased love, and profound sense of meaning. The psychiatrist Irvin Yalom writes that confronting death stirs us from our complacency and moves us from trivial concerns to authenticity. The backwards law operates with precision. Avoiding death awareness creates existential anxiety, while embracing mortality creates profound aliveness. Consider how death transforms perspective. When you truly recognize that your time is limited, that each breath brings you closer to your last, priorities clarify with stunning simplicity. Petty grievances fade. Authentic connections become precious. Creative expression becomes urgent. The question shifts from how can I be safe to how can I be fully alive in the time I have. This isn't morbid fascination but practical wisdom. Think about how differently you might live today if you knew it was your last. What would matter? What would fall away? Death awareness doesn't diminish life. It burns away the non-essential to reveal what truly matters. The Buddhist teacher Stephen Levine conducted a year-long experiment in living as if this were your last year. Participants reported profound shifts in their relationships, priorities, and spiritual awareness. Not because death is beautiful, but because its inevitability strips away illusion and reveals the preciousness of each moment. Even grief, that most painful confrontation with mortality, contains unexpected gifts. Those who allow themselves to fully grieve often discover deeper compassion, appreciation for small joys, and connection to something beyond the individual self. The very experiences we most fear often become portals to expanded consciousness. The backwards law reveals that our relationship with death shapes our experience of life. When death remains the unacknowledged shadow, fear permeates existence. When death becomes the respected teacher, life vibrates with authenticity and meaning. This understanding doesn't require belief in any particular afterlife. Whether consciousness continues beyond physical death or not, the recognition of mortality transforms how you live today. The question isn't what happens after death, but how death's reality can awaken you to life's fullness now. Modern death awareness practices integrate ancient wisdom with contemporary understanding. Death cafes provide space for conscious conversation about mortality. End-of-life dualists support the dying process as natural transition. Digital legacy planning acknowledges that our stories continue beyond physical existence. These practices don't deny death's difficulty, but engage it directly rather than through avoidance. At the deepest level, contemplating death reveals something unexpected. The witness of life's passing show remains unchanged. Who you most essentially are, the awareness in which all experiences arise, seems untouched by birth and death. As the ancient yoga teachings express it, never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor will any of us ever cease to be. This recognition doesn't negate grief or romanticize death. Rather, it suggests that beyond the changing forms of existence lies a dimension of being not subject to time's limitations. The separate self dies, awareness continues, the wave subsides, the ocean remains. Practice. Death as teacher. Set aside 20 minutes for this contemplation. Find a quiet space where you won't be disturbed. Have a journal nearby. Close your eyes and imagine receiving news that you have exactly 1 year to live. Allow this scenario to feel real. Notice what arises: fear, sadness, resistance, peace. Ask yourself these questions, pausing to feel each one deeply. What would I make peace with immediately? Whom would I spend time with, and how would that time feel? What would I stop doing that currently consumes my energy? What would I start doing that I've been postponing? What would I want to create or express before leaving? What would I want others to remember about how I lived? As you contemplate these questions, allow yourself to feel the emotions that arise. Don't rush to answers, but let the questions work on you, revealing what truly matters. Open your eyes and write your reflections. Then create one specific action step based on what death has taught you today. The backwards law reveals that confronting what we most fear often liberates us from fear itself. Death, when consciously embraced as teacher rather than enemy, offers the ultimate paradoxical gift. It teaches us how to truly live. Chapter 8. The Fertile Void of Not Knowing. From earliest childhood, we're trained to know things. Education rewards certainty, workplaces promote expertise, and social settings favor confident assertions over humble questions. Our entire identity becomes wrapped up in what we know, or think we know, about ourselves and the world. Yet the backwards law reveals a counterintuitive truth. The more firmly you cling to knowing, the more you limit your understanding. The more you embrace not knowing, the more wisdom becomes available. Ancient wisdom traditions consistently point to the limitations of conceptual knowledge. The Tao Te Ching begins, "The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name." Zen Buddhism uses koans, paradoxical questions like, "What is the sound of one hand clapping?" to break the mind's addiction to certainty. The mystical branches of all religions emphasize direct experience over dogmatic knowledge. Modern science, despite its pursuit of knowledge, repeatedly demonstrates the vastness of what we don't and perhaps cannot know. Heisenberg's uncertainty principle shows that we cannot simultaneously know a particle's position and momentum with perfect accuracy. Gödel's incompleteness theorems prove that no logical system can be both complete and consistent. The frontier of physics increasingly resembles mysticism as it encounters the limitations of measurement and observation. The backwards law operates with beautiful precision. The more you think you know, the less open you are to discovery. The more you recognize the limitations of knowing, the more receptive you become to deeper understanding. Consider how innovation emerges not from certainty, but from curiosity. The greatest scientific breakthroughs came not from saying, "I know," but from asking, "I wonder." Einstein visualized riding on a beam of light. Newton contemplated falling apples. Darwin observed finch beaks with childlike fascination. These weren't acts of knowledge, but of wonder, entering the fertile void of not knowing with open awareness. The same pattern appears in creative expression. Artists describe entering a space beyond knowing where creation happens through them rather than by them. Writers speak of characters taking over stories, musicians of becoming vessels for melodies that seem to arrive from elsewhere. The creative flow emerges not from controlling knowledge, but from receptive not knowing. Even in intimate relationships, the backwards law reveals its wisdom. When you believe you know your partner completely, you stop seeing them as they are now and relate instead to your mental image of them. But when you approach them with the humility of not knowing, with genuine curiosity about who they are in this moment, the relationship remains alive and evolving. The psychologist Carl Rogers observed that therapeutic breakthrough happens when the therapist approaches each client with beginner's mind rather than preconceived knowledge. The physicist David Bohm developed dialogue practice based on suspending assumptions and entering collective not knowing as the foundation for genuine communication. This fertile void of not knowing isn't passive ignorance or anti-intellectualism. It's an active receptivity that holds knowledge lightly while remaining open to what lies beyond conceptual understanding. It's the difference between knowledge as a closed system and knowing as an ongoing process. Neurologically, this shift moves activity from the brain's analytical centers to its more integrative networks. When the mapping, categorizing mind relaxes its grip, more holistic perception becomes available. The boundaries between observer and observed, knower and known, subject and object become more permeable. The practice of beginner's mind doesn't mean forgetting what you've learned but approaching each moment with fresh perception rather than preconceived notions. The Zen teacher Shunryu Suzuki expressed it perfectly. In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few. This understanding transforms learning itself. Instead of accumulating information to reach certainty, we engage in ongoing inquiry that reveals ever deeper questions. Instead of using knowledge to control reality, we use it as a tentative map while remaining open to the territory's continuous revelation. The mystic Thomas Merton wrote, "There is a point where I can take no more intellectual food, where I am full. It is not satiety. It is a kind of fullness in which I need to digest what I have taken, and to let it work down from my head into my heart." This movement from intellectual knowing to embodied understanding requires passing through the fertile void of not knowing. In leadership, this principle transforms how decisions are made. The most effective leaders combine clear direction with genuine openness to emerging information. They hold strategic goals while remaining flexible about pathways. They know what they don't know and create space for collective intelligence rather than imposing predetermined solutions. The backwards law suggests that wisdom comes not from accumulated certainty, but from the willingness to remain open in the face of mystery. The most profound knowing isn't an arrival at final truth, but an ongoing dance with the unknown. Practice. Embracing not knowing. For 1 week, practice inserting "I don't know" into your internal and external conversations. When faced with situations where you'd normally assert certainty, experiment with statements like, "I don't have all the answers on this, but here's my current thinking." Or, "I'm still exploring that question myself." Or even, "I used to think I knew, but now I'm not so sure." Notice the difference between reflexive certainty and conscious not knowing. Pay attention to how relationships and conversations shift when you hold knowledge lightly rather than defensively. Each morning, write down one significant question you don't have an answer for. Carry this question through your day, not as a problem to solve, but as a companion to your awareness. Notice what emerges when you live with questions rather than rushing to answers. Can you feel the spaciousness that appears when you release the need to know everything? Is there perhaps a relief in admitting uncertainty rather than maintaining the exhausting pretense of certainty? The fertile void of not knowing isn't emptiness, but pregnant possibility, the space where genuine discovery happens. The backwards law reveals that the most profound understanding arises not from grasping knowledge, but from allowing knowledge to transform into wisdom through the alchemy of humility. Chapter 9. The Gift of Imperfection. Perfection is perhaps humanity's most seductive illusion. We chase it everywhere. In our work, our appearance, our relationships, our spiritual practice. Entire industries profit from our belief that with enough effort, we could finally become that flawless version of ourselves who deserves love and admiration. Yet the backwards law reveals a stunning paradox. The more you strive for perfection, the more flawed you feel. The more you embrace your imperfections, the more whole you become. Ancient wisdom traditions consistently emphasize the beauty of imperfection. The Japanese aesthetic of wabi-sabi celebrates the cracks, weathering, and asymmetry that reveal an object's unique nature. The Gnostic Gospels suggest that if you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. Modern psychology confirms that perfectionism correlates with depression, anxiety, eating disorders, and relationship difficulties. By contrast, self-compassion, the ability to embrace oneself with kindness despite flaws, predicts greater resilience, creativity, and life satisfaction. The backwards law operates with precision. Perfection seeking creates fragmentation, while accepting imperfection creates integration. Consider how perfectionism affects creativity. The artist who demands flawless execution often produces stilted, lifeless work. The artist who embraces mistakes as part of the creative process discovers unexpected beauty and authentic expression. The Japanese concept of ikigai, effortless excellence, arises not from striving for perfection, but from loving engagement with the activity itself. In relationships, perfectionism creates disconnection. The partner trying to be perfect hides vulnerability, while the partner expected to be perfect feels resentful. But when imperfection is accepted, when we allow ourselves and others to be gloriously human, authentic intimacy becomes possible. The relationship becomes not a performance, but a sanctuary where real selves can be revealed and loved. Even in spiritual practice, perfection seeking creates the very separation it aims to overcome. The meditator trying to have the perfect meditation experiences more agitation than the one who accepts whatever arises. The seeker trying to be perfectly enlightened misses the awakening available in ordinary human experience. The psychiatrist Carl Jung recognized that psychological wholeness comes not from perfecting the personality, but from integrating the shadow, those aspects of ourselves we've rejected as flawed or unacceptable. He wrote, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." This choice involves not elimination of imperfection, but conscious relationship with the full spectrum of human experience. This understanding doesn't justify complacency or rationalize harmful behavior. Rather, it suggests that real growth comes from accepting where you are as the necessary starting point for where you're going. The backwards law reveals that genuine transformation begins with radical acceptance of what is. Consider how differently you approach a task when motivated by self-acceptance versus self-criticism. Research shows that self-compassion produces more sustained motivation and better outcomes than self-judgment. The athlete who accepts current limitations while working towards improvement performs better than the one driven by harsh inner criticism. Even physical healing follows this paradoxical pattern. Studies show that patients who fight against their illness often experience more suffering than those who accept their condition while taking appropriate action. The cancer survivor who can say, "This is happening," creates psychological space to respond effectively, while the one who insists, "This shouldn't be happening," remains caught in resistance that amplifies distress. The emerging field of positive psychology distinguishes between healthy striving, growth motivated by self-acceptance, and perfectionism, growth motivated by self-rejection. The former leads to sustainable development, while the latter creates a treadmill of achievement without satisfaction. The backwards law suggests that the path to excellence paradoxically requires embracing imperfection. The concert pianist who accepts occasional wrong notes plays with more expression than the one paralyzed by fear of mistakes. The public speaker who welcomes vulnerability connects more deeply than the one projecting flawless confidence. This understanding transforms how we approach personal development. Instead of trying to fix, improve, or perfect ourselves, we focus on becoming more fully ourselves, integrating rejected aspects, embracing vulnerability, and allowing authenticity to emerge from self-acceptance rather than self-improvement. Practice the perfection of imperfection. For 1 week, practice radical imperfection in a low-stakes area of your life. First, leave a task slightly unfinished. Then share an unpolished creation with someone. Next, express an imperfect thought without qualification. Finally, allow yourself to be seen in a vulnerable state. Notice the difference between harmful negligence, which comes from not caring, and conscious imperfection, which comes from self-acceptance. Pay attention to how others respond to your authentic humanity versus your polished performance. Each evening, practice this brief self-compassion meditation. Begin by placing your hand on your heart. Then acknowledge one way you feel imperfect or inadequate. Next, recognize that imperfection is part of the shared human experience. Finally, offer yourself kindness for this aspect, just as you would to a dear friend. As you practice, ask yourself, what parts of myself have I been hiding because I feared they weren't good enough? What might become possible if I allowed my whole self, imperfections and all, to be seen? Let these questions guide you toward greater authenticity in your daily life. The gift of imperfection isn't lowered standards but expanded humanity. The backwards law reveals that wholeness emerges not from perfecting the self, but from embracing the self as it is, cracks, contradictions, and all. In the words of Leonard Cohen, ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. Chapter 10. The Freedom Beyond Choice. Modern culture celebrates choice as the ultimate freedom. More options, more control, more opportunities to design our perfect life. Surely, this equals greater happiness. Yet research reveals a counterintuitive truth. Excessive choice often creates anxiety rather than satisfaction. The backwards law strikes again. The more options you have, the less content you feel. The more you surrender to what's given, the more freedom you experience. Ancient wisdom traditions consistently point beyond the choice-making mind to a deeper freedom. The Bhagavad Gita teaches karma yoga, action without attachment to results. Jesus instructs his followers to consider the lilies of the field that neither toil nor spin, yet are beautifully clothed. Zen Buddhism emphasizes non-doing as the foundation for appropriate action. Modern psychology confirms that the paradox of choice creates decision fatigue, buyer's remorse, and perpetual FOMO, fear of missing out. Studies show that people presented with fewer options often report greater satisfaction with their decisions than those facing abundant choices. The backwards law operates precisely. More options create mental imprisonment, while conscious limitation creates psychological freedom. Consider how this paradox appears in creative work. The writer facing infinite possibilities often experiences paralyzing block. The writer working within formal constraints, whether sonnet structure, word count, or genre conventions, often finds paradoxical freedom. Constraints channel creative energy, while boundless options dissipate it. Even in relationships, unlimited choice can undermine commitment. Dating apps presenting endless possibilities create what sociologists call the paradox of persistent romantic loneliness, more options leading to less connection. By contrast, those who fully commit to chosen relationships often discover deeper freedom through that commitment than through perpetual optionality. The psychologist Barry Schwartz distinguishes between maximizers, those who exhaustively review all options seeking the optimal choice, and satisficers, those who select the first option that meets their core criteria. Research shows that satisficers typically report greater happiness, less regret, and more satisfaction with their decisions. This doesn't mean abandoning discernment or embracing fatalism. Rather, it suggests a more nuanced relationship with choice, recognizing when more options serve us and when they become a psychological burden. The backwards law reveals that freedom comes not from having infinite choices, but from wholeheartedly embracing the choices we make. Consider how differently life unfolds when you shift from "what else could I choose?" to "how fully can I engage with what I've chosen?" The first orientation creates perpetual dissatisfaction. The second creates depth and meaning. Even in spirituality, this paradox operates. Those seeking the perfect path often hop from teacher to teacher, tradition to tradition, practice to practice, never going deep enough to experience transformation. Those who commit to a single path, even while recognizing its imperfections, often discover the freedom that comes through depth rather than breadth. The French existentialist Jean-Paul Sartre spoke of humans being condemned to freedom, forced to make choices without adequate information about outcomes. This creates existential anxiety. But spiritual traditions offer a complementary perspective. Beneath the choosing self lies awareness itself, which doesn't choose but witnesses all choices with equanimity. This witnessing awareness represents freedom of a different order, not freedom to control outcomes, but freedom from identification with outcomes. Not freedom to have anything you want, but freedom from being controlled by wanting. Not freedom of infinite options, but freedom from the burden of optionality itself. The backward law suggests that this deeper freedom emerges not through maximizing choice, but through transcending the choosing mind altogether. you discover that while the separate self struggles with decisions, your essential nature remains unchanging, the silent witness behind all mental activity. Practice. Chosen limitations. For 1 week, experiment with conscious limitation in various areas. First, choose one meal to eat repeatedly rather than constantly seeking variety. Next, limit your wardrobe to a few favorite items rather than agonizing over daily choices. Then, commit to one book instead of jumping between several. Finally, select one practice for spiritual development and stick with it daily. Notice the difference between limitation imposed through scarcity, which creates deprivation, and limitation chosen consciously, which creates focused and depth. Pay attention to how energy previously consumed by choosing becomes available for deeper engagement. Can you feel the relief that comes with having fewer options? Notice how much mental space opens up when you're not constantly weighing possibilities. Is there perhaps a pleasure in commitment that exceeds the pleasure of endless choice? Each day, practice a moment of surrender with this simple contemplation. In this moment, I release the burden of endless choices. I accept what is given and find freedom in responding fully to what is rather than perpetually seeking what could be. The freedom beyond choice isn't passive resignation, but active alignment with what philosopher William James called the deeper will, the wisdom that operates beneath the choosing mind. The backwards law reveals that true freedom comes not from controlling life through endless options, but from surrendering to life's intelligence as it expresses through your unique form. Chapter 11. The Luminous Darkness. Light symbolizes knowledge, clarity, understanding, and growth in virtually every cultural tradition. We speak of enlightenment, illumination, and seeing the light. Our institutions and technologies work tirelessly to banish darkness, both literal and metaphorical. Yet the backwards law reveals a profound paradox. The more you avoid darkness, the more you limit your vision. The more you embrace darkness, the more you perceive what light alone cannot reveal. Ancient wisdom traditions consistently honor darkness as sacred teacher. The Hebrew prophets encountered God in the cloud of unknowing. Egyptian initiations occurred in underground temples. Indigenous ceremonies worldwide used darkness for vision quests and spiritual rebirth. The mystical branches of all religions speak of the dark night of the soul as essential for spiritual maturation. Modern depth psychology confirms that growth requires engaging the unconscious, those aspects of psyche hidden from rational awareness. Carl Jung observed that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Dreams, shadows, and symbolic processes reveal what analytical thinking cannot access. The backwards law operates with precision. Light seeking without darkness embracing creates spiritual bypass, while integrating darkness with light creates wholeness. Consider how this paradox appears in emotional life. Those who seek perpetual happiness often experience fragile positivity that collapses under life's inevitable challenges. Those who make room for grief, fear, and anger alongside joy and peace develop emotional resilience, the capacity to embrace the full spectrum of human experience. Even in creativity, darkness plays an essential role. The poet Rainer Maria Rilke advised a young writer, "Be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves. Live the questions now. Perhaps you will then gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answer." Creative solutions emerge not from constant analytical clarity, but from allowing periods of uncertainty, confusion, and gestation. The psychiatrist M. Scott Peck observed that genuine spiritual growth moves from simplistic certainty through necessary disillusionment to a more nuanced, integrated understanding. The middle phase, what he called the sacred darkness, involves questioning previously held beliefs, facing uncomfortable truths, and navigating without the comfort of absolute certainty. This doesn't mean glorifying suffering or romanticizing depression. Rather, it suggests that aspects of human experience traditionally labeled negative contain essential wisdom when approached with consciousness. The backwards law reveals that integration requires embracing both light and shadow rather than seeking light alone. Consider how differently life unfolds when you shift from, "How can I avoid darkness?" to "What is this darkness trying to teach me?" The first orientation creates fragmentation. The second creates wholeness. Even in physical healing, darkness plays crucial roles. Sleep, that daily surrender to darkness, is when the body repairs itself, the brain consolidates learning, and the psyche processes emotions through dreams. Light pollution disrupts these essential rhythms, while embracing natural darkness supports physical and psychological health. The pioneering psychedelic researcher Stanislav Grof discovered that transformative healing often requires confronting what he called perinatal matrices, deep psychic imprints related to birth and death. These dark, challenging experiences, when consciously navigated, often lead to profound psychological rebirth. Attempting to bypass this darkness through perpetual positivity creates what Grof called spiritual materialism, using spiritual practices to reinforce ego rather than transform it. Environmentally, our cultural avoidance of darkness creates literal harm. Light pollution disrupts ecosystems, wastes energy, and disconnects us from the night sky that oriented humanity for millennia. The backwards law suggests that environmental healing requires not just technological solutions, but reconciliation with darkness, both ecological and psychological. The dark night of the soul, described by mystic John of the Cross, represents a necessary phase of spiritual development when previous concepts of God, self, and reality dissolve. This dissolution creates space for direct experience beyond conceptual understanding. The luminous darkness becomes not the absence of divine presence, but its most intimate expression. Practice. Embracing the darkness. Create sacred space for an exploration of literal and metaphorical darkness. Spend time in natural darkness without artificial light. Journal about an aspect of yourself you typically hide or deny. Sit with an uncomfortable emotion without trying to change or fix it. Contemplate a question or uncertainty without rushing to answer it. Notice the difference between unconscious darkness, being unaware, and conscious darkness, being aware within what's unknown or unseen. Pay attention to how different qualities of perception become available when you stop insisting on constant illumination. Each evening before sleep, practice this brief contemplation. I welcome the sacred darkness that restores and renews. I release the need for constant clarity and control. I trust the wisdom that works beneath conscious awareness. The luminous darkness isn't the absence of light, but a different quality of perception. The backwards law reveals that true illumination comes not from banishing darkness, but from discovering the light hidden within it, the dark luminosity that reveals what surface brightness conceals. Chapter 12. The Dance of Opposites. Throughout this exploration of the backwards law, we've encountered numerous paradoxes. Happiness comes through accepting unhappiness. Control comes through surrender. Connection comes through solitude. Knowing comes through not knowing. These aren't isolated insights but expressions of a fundamental principle. Life unfolds not through either slash or choices, but through the integration of apparent opposites. Ancient wisdom traditions consistently emphasize this unity of opposites. Taoism centers on the dance of yin and yang, complementary forces that create wholeness through their interaction. Hinduism depicts deities with both creative and destructive aspects. Indigenous philosophies worldwide emphasize the balance of masculine and feminine energies, heaven and earth forces, visible and invisible realms. Modern physics confirms this non-dualistic perspective. Light behaves as both wave and particle. Matter and energy are different expressions of the same reality. The observer affects the observed, dissolving the supposed boundary between subject and object. As physicist Niels Bohr stated, the opposite of a profound truth may well be another profound truth. The backwards law reveals the limitations of binary thinking and the power of paradoxical awareness. When you recognize that opposites contain and create each other, you move from fragmentation to wholeness, from either slash or to both slash and. Consider how this understanding transforms personal development. The conventional approach sets up battles between aspects of self: discipline versus spontaneity, rationality versus intuition, independence versus connection. This creates internal conflict and fragmentation. The paradoxical approach recognizes that these polarities need integration, not victory of one over the other. The psychologist Carl Jung called this holding the tension of opposites, maintaining awareness of contradictory truths without collapsing into simple resolution. This tension creates what he called the transcendent function, the emergence of a third perspective that integrates rather than eliminates the opposites. The same principle applies to relationships. Partners often polarize around differences. One becomes the responsible one, while the other becomes spontaneous. One expresses emotion, while the other maintains rationality. The backwards law suggests that healing comes not from either person changing, but from each integrating the quality they've projected onto the other. Even collective challenges require paradoxical awareness. Environmental solutions need both technological innovation and lifestyle simplification. Social justice requires both systemic change and personal transformation. Global cooperation demands both cultural universals and respect for diversity. The backwards law reveals that sustainable solutions emerge not from ideological purity, but from integrating complementary perspectives. This dance of opposites doesn't lead to passive neutrality or bland compromise. Rather, it creates dynamic balance, the capacity to access different qualities as needed while recognizing their underlying unity. The wise leader is both compassionate and firm, the effective parent both nurturing and boundaried, the mature individual both self-accepting and growth-oriented. The psychiatrist Viktor Frankl discovered that meaning emerges through this paradoxical awareness. In Nazi concentration camps, he observed that survival correlated with the ability to maintain seemingly contradictory perspectives. Absolute acceptance of current reality alongside unwavering hope for the future. Recognition of horrific circumstances alongside capacity for momentary joy. Acknowledgement of personal powerlessness alongside exercise of inner freedom. The integral philosopher Ken Wilber distinguishes between either slash or thinking, appropriate for technical problems, and both slash and awareness, necessary for adaptive challenges. The former works well for fixing machines. The latter is essential for human development and social evolution. This paradoxical awareness transforms spiritual practice itself. The genuine seeker discovers that awakening involves both extraordinary realization and ordinary humanness, both transcendent awareness and embodied engagement, both absolute truth and relative expression. The backwards law suggests that integration, not purification, creates wholeness. Practice. Dancing with paradox. Identify a situation where you feel caught in either slash or thinking, whether personal, relational, or collective. Write down the apparent opposites. Egg, I need to be more disciplined, versus I need more spontaneity. Now explore the paradoxical integration of these opposites. Ask yourself, asterisk, how might these apparently contradictory needs actually complement each other? Asterisk, what would it look like to embody both qualities simultaneously? Asterisk, how does either extreme, taken alone, create imbalance? Asterisk, what third way might emerge that honors the wisdom in both perspectives? Practice holding this paradoxical awareness throughout your day. When you notice yourself collapsing into either slash or thinking, gently expand your perspective to include both sides of the polarity. Notice how this creates more spaciousness and possibility. The dance of opposites isn't abstract philosophy, but practical wisdom for navigating life's complexity. The backwards law reveals that wholeness emerges not from resolving paradox, but from dancing with it. allowing complementary truths to create a harmony more powerful than either could achieve alone. Chapter 13. The Boundaries of the Backwards Law. The backwards law offers a powerful perspective on life, but it's not a universal formula for every situation. To apply it effectively, we must understand when to use it and when direct effort is needed. This law works best with internal states and emotions like happiness, peace, and confidence. You cannot command yourself to be happy and expect it to happen. These states emerge when we create conditions for them through acceptance and letting go. Similarly, deep relationships flourish when we accept others rather than trying to control them. Creative flow often appears in moments of relaxation, not when we're forcing ourselves to find ideas. Conversely, some areas require direct effort. Specific skills and knowledge need consistent practice and active learning. A musician cannot become proficient merely by letting go without practice. Social change demands collective action and commitment, not just passive acceptance. Financial planning and goal setting require strategic thinking and deliberate decisions. Emergency situations call for immediate and decisive responses. The crucial distinction lies between wise surrender and mere avoidance. Wise surrender comes from full presence and acceptance of reality, creating a sense of ease and often requiring courage. Avoidance stems from fear and the desire to escape discomfort, usually involving self-deception and creating underlying tension. One entrepreneur misapplied this principle when he abandoned all business planning for the sake of letting go, resulting in serious revenue decline. He later realized he needed to let go of worry and the need for control, while still maintaining purposeful action in his leadership role. To apply the backwards law effectively, identify the type of problem you're facing. If it relates to internal states, the backwards law usually applies. If it involves specific skills or actions, direct effort is typically necessary. Check your motives. Are you letting go from a position of strength or trying to avoid discomfort? The ideal approach often combines both methods. An effective leader thoroughly prepares for meetings, but before entering, she releases detachment to outcomes. She explains, "I prepare as if everything depends on me, and then let go as if everything depends on something else." True wisdom lies not in choosing between effort and surrender, but in knowing when to apply each approach and how to integrate them harmoniously in daily life. The most skillful practitioners of the backwards law recognize that there's a time for direct pursuit and a time for indirect allowing. They develop the discernment to know which is which and the flexibility to move between these approaches as circumstances require. Consider how this integration might work in your own life. In what areas have you been forcing when you should be allowing? Where might you be using surrender as an excuse for inaction? The backwards law, when properly understood, doesn't eliminate effort. It transforms our relationship with it, creating a more effective and peaceful approach to life's challenges. Conclusion: the ripple effect of living backwards. As we reach the end of our exploration, let's take a moment to reflect on the journey we've shared. The backwards law has revealed itself not just as a philosophical concept, but as a practical pathway through life's most challenging landscapes. Throughout these chapters, we've discovered a profound truth. When we stop chasing what we want most desperately, it often finds its way to us naturally. This isn't magical thinking. It's a psychological and spiritual reality that countless individuals have experienced across cultures and throughout history. Think of this approach as creating ripples in a pond. When you drop a stone of acceptance into the water of your life, the ripples spread outward, transforming everything they touch. Your relationships become more authentic. Your creative work gains depth. Your emotions flow more freely. Your sense of purpose clarifies without straining. What makes this approach so powerful is its gentleness. Unlike many self-improvement strategies that require constant effort and vigilance, the backwards way invites you to release the exhausting grip of control. It asks, what might happen if you trusted the natural intelligence of life itself? The answer, as we've explored, is paradoxical freedom. By surrendering to what it is, You gain the ability to respond with wisdom rather than react with fear. By accepting imperfection, you discover unexpected beauty in the cracks and flaws. By embracing uncertainty, you open yourself to possibilities beyond your planning mind. This doesn't mean abandoning all effort or responsibility. Rather, it means finding the sweet spot where effort becomes effortless, where doing arises from being, where action flows from acceptance, where achievement emerges from appreciation. As you move forward from these pages, carry with you this simple practice. Whenever you feel yourself straining, grasping, or forcing, pause. Take a breath. Ask yourself, what would happen if I moved in the opposite direction right now? Then experiment with loosening your grip just slightly. The paradox awaits your discovery in everyday moments. Asterisk when overwhelmed, try doing less rather than more. Asterisk when anxious about an outcome, practice caring less rather than more. Asterisk when seeking love, focus on giving rather than getting. Asterisk when needing clarity, embrace confusion rather than fighting it. Asterisk when desiring change, accept the present rather than rejecting it. These small experiments can create profound shifts over time. Like learning to swim, the backwards way may feel counterintuitive at first, but eventually becomes second nature. Remember that this journey isn't about reaching a destination of perfect backwards living. It's about dancing with paradox, embracing both effort and surrender, both intention and acceptance, both doing and being. The mastery comes not in perfecting one approach, but in knowing when each serves you best. Before we part, I invite you to create your own personal touchstone for living backwards. Write a simple phrase that captures the specific paradox most relevant to your life right now. Place it somewhere you'll see daily, on your mirror, phone wallpaper, or desk. Let it remind you of this alternative path when old habits of forcing and controlling resurface. The backwards law offers not just a different way of doing, but a different way of seeing. It invites you to recognize that what you've been seeking, peace, love, fulfillment, connection, isn't waiting in some distant future when everything finally aligns perfectly. It's available now, in this imperfect moment, when you stop postponing life and start showing up for it exactly as it is. This recognition doesn't end your journey. It transforms it from a desperate search into an adventure of discovery, from a struggle against reality into a dance with it, from fragmented striving into wholehearted being. The backwards journey continues with every breath, every choice, every moment of surrender to what is. And in that surrender, you may find what all your striving could never achieve: the quiet joy of being fully alive, fully yourself, fully home.